Hi, Kevin Coupe here. So I've been thinking about the problem that so many retailers are dealing with, right? The fact that so many of their shelves are empty. Not just retailers dealing with it, it's consumers dealing with it. And it's certainly raised a certain amount of frustration in the industry. And I was thinking, out of stocks. Who do I know that could talk to me a little bit about out of stocks and how the industry should approach this issue, both from a short term and a long term perspective? Are there lessons that the industry should be learning that will help them long term? And go figure, I realized I know a guy, Randy Fields, right? CEO of Park City Group, which owns ResposiTrak, which has the ResposiTrak out of stock management solution. Um, those of you who read Morning Newsbeat know that ResposiTrak has been, continues to be a sponsor of Morning Newsbeat, which I really, really appreciate. But in this case, I wanted to talk to Randy in an editorial point of view because I wanted to talk to him a little bit about the out of stock issue. So I reached out to him. We did a little Skype thing. You can watch it now, and I think it's kind of interesting. Enjoy. So Randy, welcome to Morning Newsbeat. When it was just a few months ago that you and I sat in a podcasting studio in Austin, Texas, and talked about out of stocks. And I don't think either of us would have dreamed at that moment that 12 weeks later, nobody would be able to get toilet paper. That every paper product shelf in America would be virtually empty. First of all, as somebody who's very involved in helping to solve the out of stock problem, just give me your reaction to what's going on right now.
Well, I think the obvious is this is very short term. The other obvious point is that this is going to, in spite of its short-term nature, my fear is that it's going to cause some long-term negative things for our industry. It will try and shift people to online buying. The grocery industry was not as well prepared, I know, as it would have liked to have been for the online onslaught that it got. So there's not as many successes from the online world in grocery as Amazon is experiencing. So I'm sure we've sent some of our customers to Amazon. That's unfortunate. And the other is that bothers me in a way is these are supply chain problems that, frankly, if we hadn't gotten newfangled and the latest, greatest and followed the latest religious beliefs around thinning out your supply chain, just-in-time inventory, et cetera, probably wouldn't have happened. So to a certain extent, decisions that were made 5 and 10 years ago around the grocery supply chain have caused the problems that our customers are experiencing, and therefore that we as an industry are experiencing. And that it's unfortunate. It's, as I say, it was who could have known except we should have known. And now it's going to be a little bit more difficult.
I wonder if at some level this will take, I mean, you and I have talked about this before, is there was so much focus on things like, robots that wander up and down the aisles looking for the out of stocks. Well, man, you don't need a robot right now to know where the problems are, and you don't need a robot to understand how to solve the problem. So maybe at some level, this will be an awakening in terms of getting people to look at what the real problem is and kind of sort of real on the ground solutions as opposed to the bright and shiny object.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the correct observation, that the new shiny object was just-in-time inventory. The new shiny object was source things outside the country with a long lead time supply chain. I think the shiny object was robots. The shiny object was go on and on and on. When in fact, we've had a supply chain that for many years functioned just fine. We used to second source products, no more. We used to stock, typically, in our experience, 2 to 4 months worth of inventory in our DCs. No, now it's 4 to 6 weeks. So we've leaned everything out. And guess what happens when you lean it out and there's a sudden unpredictable increase in demand? Whoops. The other side of this, of course, that everybody's trying to prepare for is the bullwhip effect, is that right now demand seems insatiable. And we all know that uh, as we go home to our houses and open the closet door to put our coat in, and the toilet paper falls out and nearly crushes us, that we're going to stop buying toilet paper. What happens to that order flow? Have we ordered properly? Do we actually know how to stock, or have we now lost track of what the other side of this frenzied demand curve looks like? And I'm not sure that we have. We spend lots of times with suppliers. I think we have 25, let's call it 25,000 suppliers that we interact with in our system. And most of them are trying to figure out what, not just what's happening, but how do they avoid staffing up, getting ready to satisfy short-term demand, only to have a retailer jerk the order and cancel it in 3 weeks. And then what happens? So this is the unpleasant side from a consumer perspective of what we're experiencing. But we're not very far in terms of time from when we're going to create some real problems in the supply chain.
Well, it's interesting on the toilet paper side, at least, there was, I think it was a story in the Wall Street Journal, and I'm not sure if this has remained in place, but when this all started to hit, and I forget who the manufacturer was, basically said, no, we're not ramping up production. It doesn't make sense to ramp up production because this is going to be a short-term problem. There's lots of toilet paper out there. We don't need to do more. We just need to make sure it's in the right place at the right time, which was
exactly right.
Sort of mature.
Yes, no, it's exactly right.
A better term.
It's exactly right. And the fascinating piece of it is that the nature of how these panics occur is it only takes one thing to go into short supply. There's probably not many of your listeners are old enough to remember. Maybe a few of us are. But Johnny Carson many years ago was joking during the Nixon era, but during the whip inflation now, the win strategy. Isn't it frightening that win has come back again? The administration used that the other day. And he came in and he joked one night about a toilet paper shortage next. And sure as hell the next day, toilet paper's off the shelves. Well, the problem is that as you hear, and this, who knows how this got started, but as you go in and you buy toilet paper and you notice people are buying toilet paper, you think, well, how do I get ahead of this? And the answer is paper towels. So you take extra paper towels, and then people see your cart loaded with paper towels and they think, I must be stupid. Clearly paper towels are next. I better go back and get paper towels. And then it's napkins, and then it's whatever's next to it. So it's all over the store. It's everywhere now. And call me crazy, but since obviously we're not all eating more now, the end of this is not pleasant. And it's worse than that, and we're not thinking in these terms. The supply chain of almost all of this, although we think of it as a grocery problem, really isn't that. It's a combination of grocery plus food service. So there are more warehouses than Carter has little liver pills. There's another one of those age things. Then Carter has little liver pills that are filled with the same kinds of products that we sell, many cases packaged differently, and it's sitting there. So if you actually looked at the supply chain right now, the combination of food service and retail food is not nearly as bad off as you would imagine just going into a grocery store. So that's going to come back at us also. My guess is that Cisco and every other food service vendor in the world is going to figure out, how do I get this to grocery stores? Or worse, how do I disintermediate my grocery stores and go directly to consumer? So conceptually, because we don't have a total view of the supply chain, and demand hasn't really increased across the supply chain, it's within the supply chain, and it's in a very narrow period of time, I don't think this is going to end very well. This is the fun part, where people are throwing money at you to get toilet paper. Just watch what happens when they start throwing toilet paper at you to get money. That's the other side.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. And I suppose at some level, what's really important to learn from this current out of stock situation is to figure out who's going to figure out how to deal with it next time. Now, next time might be a pandemic, it might be a hurricane, it might be an earthquake, it might be a really bad pileup on I-95 that shuts down traffic for a day and a half. I mean, it could be a lot of different things. But it seems to me that, and I always hate to hold Amazon out there as the panacea, but they tend to think about this stuff well. You know, I can't I can't help but think that somewhere Jeff Bezos is saying, all right, we've got a lot of warehouses. We need a warehouse that just has toilet paper, paper towels, masks, gowns, gloves, and Purell. Because when this happens again, we're going to be the only people out there to have it.
Mm-hmm.
And which sort of goes back to what you started with, which is to say that if retailers stop thinking about just in time and start thinking about having maybe more stores in their warehouses than they just need to get through the next few weeks, that might be a smart way to come at the market. But then does that automatically mean that maybe instead of having 40,000 SKUs in the average store, they should have 30 or 20 or 10, or really edited like a Trader Joe's and maybe have 4,000 SKUs?
This is
where they got?
No, I think you're spot on. As you know from the last time you and I were together, we are extraordinarily concerned that the food industry is driving its customers toward Amazon by virtue of out of stocks. People don't go to Amazon because of the price is lower. I'm not sure if anybody knows if the price is lower, but they go to Amazon because they can't find what they want in the supermarket. Then they go from, oh, I couldn't find what I wanted, to this is easy, kind of like this. And it's the crack cocaine of the consumer era. It's easy now to buy stuff online. And you couldn't have this turn out.
Have they learned that in the last month?
Oh my God, but it's worse. At exactly the wrong moment, and I bet we're going to look back and see, at exactly the wrong moment, the supermarkets tried to emulate this and got into the delivery and pickup business. Whoops, that's not going very well. In fact, it's interesting. I did a survey just where I live, for whatever it's worth. Mother-in-law and apocryphal, I know, but every local supermarket has now given up, quote, during the crisis, pickup and delivery. Why? Well, the obvious. People would call and say, I'll take 500 cases of Fanta and 700 rolls of Bounty. So it didn't work. And the pickers got in the way of the shoppers and so on and so forth. So more than normal, and out of stocks have been a problem for the pickup and delivery business because of the out of stocks. So what's happened is now more and more consumers who've tried it, perhaps for the first time, didn't experience success. So it's not clear that the industry attempt to get into a competitive position with Amazon through delivery was done also at the right moment. So to me, it's physician, heal thyself. And right now that means fix your supply chain. You can't lean it out. You've got to have fewer things. How much can you keep in stock? How do you make that decision first?
So if you had to make there's a lot of fires that have to be put out right now by retailers. Yeah. And so they're making short-term decisions, and I get that. But it seems to me that 6, 8, 10, 12, 18 months from now, it'll be a new normal, but some of the madness will have subsided. So if you had to make a core recommendation for how retailers should think differently about product and what they have in their stores and how to make sure they're in stock, what would that recommendation be?
Well, I would start backwards, strangely enough. I would ask this question. If it turns out that going forward, we have done shock and awe on the consumer about being in stock, and our argument is that's been going on for years anyway, this is shock and awe around out of stocks. What are we capable of doing as a business to stay in stock? Meaning, let's start from the shelf and work backwards into the supply chain to be sure that whatever we carry, except under the most extreme of circumstances, we always have it 100% of the time, like retail used to be, not like it's become. And that means that SKU proliferation, certainly in our view, has driven out of stocks because there's less shelf holding power. It means that you probably have to rationalize SKUs more. It almost certainly means you have to think of backup sourcing. How do you find alternative vendors that can supply you in an uninterrupted way? You have to treat your supply chain the way military does. You have to think of it in terms of, my God, it isn't just about the price of my supply chain. It's how robust is it? Can it deliver when I need it, when I stress it a little bit? What good is a supply chain that breaks and can't deliver toilet paper? It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, right? And yet here we are. We have a whole supply chain that can't find a roll of toilet paper. Here where I live, they've started arresting people that go to truck stops stealing, yes, seriously, stealing toilet paper. They've arrested a guy. He's going to go to prison for stealing 80 rolls of toilet paper.
Yeah, I have to admit, I shouldn't admit this, but I will. I was at the bank the other day, and as I was walking out, there was a counter by the front door. Nobody was there, and there was one full bottle of Purell. And I did have a moment where I said to myself, you know, I, but it would probably be bank robbery or something. I'll get myself on it. I did have that fleeting moment where I said, I could just grab it. Nobody would know.
Found one.
I'm really glad I didn't.
Yeah.
Well, listen, this has been interesting. This has been fascinating. And listen, I think while there are a lot of problems here, what's going on right now in the supply chain and going on in stores has actually served to shine the spotlight on much bigger issues that I think the industry's got to deal with. And I hope we can catch up again down the road and talk about it some more.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Take care.
Take care.